Good afternoon. Welcome to the June 8th meeting of the Thurston Regional Housing Council. We will start with a check-in with introductions. I'm Carolyn Cox, representing City of Lacey, and I'm your chair. And from Lacey, we also have Rick Walk, our Director of Community and Economic Development, and the amazing Kelly Adams. We go to Tumwater.
Hi, Michael Altauser, Tumwater City Council member. I'm joined by Brad Medrud from our planning department, and I believe we will also be joined by Council member Joan Cathy in a few moments.
I have to confess a huge oversight. We have Lacey Mayor Andy Ryder, who's our alternate to the Housing Council, on the call. He's just back from Poland. So how about let's go ahead and have a Yelm check-in. Brian?
This is Brian Hess, Yelm City Council member.
Welcome. And let's see. Okay, Jim is just joining us. So why don't we go with Jim for Olympia? Are you with us, Jim? Is he still connecting? Okay, how about Thurston County?
Good afternoon. I believe Commissioner Mejia will be joining us here shortly. So from the county, myself, Ramiro Chavez, County Manager, we have Tom Webster. So there's Kelly Murno and Cindy Sturgis. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Olympia.
Yeah, hi, Jim Cooper from the Olympia City Council and Danny Madrone from the Olympia City Council. And then our staff are on leave or have conflicts this evening. So we'll be able to text or catch up with them afterwards if we need to.
All righty.
Sorry I'm late. I had the fourth Wednesday is what came up in my appointment, the Zoom login.
It's always something, isn't it?
Chair Cox, I've been resending panelist links as soon as I see people start registering as attendees. So we're getting that resolved.
Oh, thank you. All righty. Has everybody had a chance to look at the agenda? Can I have a motion to adopt it?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Then moved by Michael, seconded by Jim to approve the agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, agenda is approved, and we'll welcome Commissioner Carolina Mejia. Good to see you. Can I have a motion to approve the May 25th minutes?
Move approval.
Okay. I'll second it. So moved by Jim Cooper, seconded by Carolyn to approve the minutes. All in favor, please.
Carolyn,
Aye.
before we vote, I just want to say I'm going to abstain because I missed that meeting and Joan represented the city on our behalf.
Okay. Thanks for sharing that. So all who can vote in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And we have one abstention with Michael. All righty. Keely has agreed to lead a conversation delving a little more deeply into the May 6th and May 13th retreat. Keely, are you all set?
As set as I can be, yes.
Okay.
All right. So in the agenda packet that went out, there was a letter of transmittal for artifacts from the retreat that was sent by Megan Picard and Ava McGee. And I'm hoping that members, I know I myself am also quite busy, that members have had an opportunity to read through that letter and perhaps look at the artifacts that are a link in that letter. In our conversation with Megan and Ava, our being Darian Lightfoot and myself, it brought me a little bit of ease when I realized, when looking at the artifacts and having that conversation, that actually we did accomplish quite a lot. And so this letter that has come before us, at the letter of transmittal, does, I think, a really good job in kind of grounding us in the original purpose of the retreat, and then does provide us with their thoughts and some light recommendations, and encourages us to look at the three key decisions that they noted, that we all noted at the end of the retreat. So in one of the light recommendations in our conversation, which I think is pretty well represented in the letter of transmittal, is regardless of which direction we go in with becoming an independent entity, or our governance structure, going slow, going fast, that there being additional staff provided to help move this conversation along. So that was one of the biggest takeaways I had from the conversation with Megan and Ava. So if it's helpful, I am happy to share some of this letter on screen, and then bring up some of the artifacts I have pulled up and have ready. The conversation we had around the North Star. So if at your preference, if you'd like to look at the key decisions that we left the retreat with, summarized by the Athena Group, or look at the North Star document that they created, I'm happy to do either, if there's a preference.
I think it'd be good to have it on screen.
Mhm.
Anybody disagree with that?
Great. Would you prefer that we look at the key decisions that we're facing right now, that we identified at the retreat, or pull up one of the artifacts just to kind of show what they look like? Any preference? All right, I will check.
Fair. Yeah.
So this is what they put together for us out of our artifacts, or how do we reach our North Star, which was work that we did on the second day. And so these are taken directly from our notes. We did some work on some flip charts in conversation, kind of brainstorming through this conversation for a while on the second day. So some of the things that were identified that we need to be addressed to reach the North Star, and that was this star right here, which is functional zero, affordable housing, and equity. Are questions such as, how do we revive mission and vision and create strategic goals? How does equity fit in? Housing solutions, safety and affordability for everyone, data, understanding what functional zero even means, and a lot of conversations around addressing racial equity was what we need to use to address, to reach. I can't speak. I'm looking at the words and it's really confusing me. What needs to be addressed to reach our North Star? Got it. It's been a long day. All right. What do we know about what needs to be addressed to reach our North Star? Continuing housing action plans, regional demographic data, and then a few typos in there. Remember the purpose of the Regional Housing Council, name by name list. So just calling out the things that we discussed. So literally taking our words, putting them on a document to look at all together and be reminded of the work that we did. So, and then at the end, just photos of the work that physically that we did. We moved on to, what does functional zero mean to me? And these are some of the definitions that we came up with, really highlighting going big and going bold and going broad. And that is that artifact. In each of these folders, you'll find photos of the work that we actually did, notes from the work from this particular section, and then some, at times, documents that they've put together to help demonstrate like that particular topic. So they've included the learning materials that we used, conversations about our relationships, so the community agreements, psychological safety, that sort of thing, And then the exercise, especially today, that Ava let us in, strategic direction, system design, future considerations, and then just some photos from the work that we did. So I won't go through all of these right now. I just encourage you to spend some time looking through them to remind you of like what work we did do and to help launch what comes next in our conversations. And then I'll stop sharing that and pull up the letter. So I believe in the second page here, we have the key decisions that we noted at the end of the retreat for us to be working on, or for the Regional Housing Council to be working on, including will the Regional Housing Council become a separate organization like LOT or the King County Homelessness Authority, and then some thoughts from their perspective to help launch a conversation. How will funding work to address both homelessness prevention, including the expansion of affordable, attainable housing options and support for people at risk of losing housing, and homelessness response? So talking about a funding model. And then will the RHC create a refreshed strategic plan that is inclusive of affordable housing prevention and homelessness response objectives? So this, they call out some of the interviews that were had, some of the opinions expressed during the interviews prior to the retreat, and then some recommendations moving forward. And I can leave this up for just a moment, but this is what we have to work from. And I am very appreciative of this letter coming. It's very timely that it came right before the Regional Housing Council, so that we can at least look at where we were at the end of that 2-day experience and kind of make a plan moving forward. I will say that the technical team is having a tiny mini retreat on Friday to have a little bit more of that conversation within that team related to these findings and next steps. But I will just stop there and open the floor for questions, conversation, feedback, reflections.
Anyone?
Brian?
Yes, I thought it was a great retreat. And one of the things that if we go through the process of building that independent entity, like the King County Homelessness Council, things like that, I think for us, something that I would like to see that we focus on, and it's been something I've been working on ever since that retreat, is the housing unstable being such a large percentage. I mean, 30% is pretty large. Remember, only 1% are homeless. And I think that we need to focus on both issues and find a way to do that. So I want to make sure that we aren't always just focusing on the homeless, but that we're also focusing on the housing unstable as well, trying to find ways to make sure that there's the affordable housing, some kind of safety net put together for that 30%. That was 2018. And I mean, we're now in 2022 with inflation going up, and the economy is not as good as it could be. And so that 30%, if we aren't careful on trying to make sure that we do something to help stabilize them and they start slipping into the homelessness, we will have that number raised from 1% to a larger number. And the cost that we spend on homelessness will actually become larger than just trying to figure out a way to help the housing unstable. That's something I'd like to just make, that I've been reflecting on and trying to work through with all that's been going on.
Okay. Thanks, Brian. Who else? Andy?
Yeah, so obviously I missed the retreat. I was over in Europe, and so I'm looking forward to getting a debrief from you, Carolyn, and hearing where we're at. But I am kind of curious, what are the next steps? What is the next major decision point that we need to make to going forward?
We want to take a swing at that? Jim?
Yeah, well, and I think the meeting we had, without this in front of us a couple of weeks ago, this is really helpful, because I missed the first day of the retreat, and I feel like that there's a better return on our investment of our time and our cash with this product. So that it is really helpful, Keely. And I think they did a nice job capturing, in number 3, those 4 bullets feel pretty close to what we talked about last, 2 weeks ago without having this in front of us. And, so I think, there's a little bit of tweaking, and I think, Brian's question is the biggest one. Almost every resource we have is set into, crisis intervention, and how do we get some of our resources upstream into that, general affordable housing stock, because we need to bring those tax credits to our community too, and that requires a bigger pot of money than we've had for anything before, because those projects are bigger.
We have maybe the technical team. I mean, Keely, you kind of alluded to the mini retreat coming up, but to help Andy get caught up here a little bit, talk about the work that you all are doing to try to identify, work on governance and next steps.
Yeah, I'll kick it off and then look to Rick and Tom to help fill in whatever I leave out. So some of the next steps we did, as of last Regional Housing Council meeting, we did have a conversation of, has there been any feedback from the Housing Action Team who were in attendance at the Regional Housing Council retreat? And we did get an opportunity to get some feedback during a homeless crisis response plan work group, where we had the technical team, many of the members of the technical team there. And some of the takeaways from that were the hat felt generally like more hopeful than they expected to be, but they were concerned that we'd return to business as usual. That there was a conversation that there seems to be a need for 2 parallel processes to be happening. One, the governance structure of the Regional Housing Council needs to be discussed and worked on at the same time, while the Housing Action Team and perhaps that homeless crisis response plan work group works on a model to present to the Regional Housing Council on how to meaningfully participate. Because some of the biggest takeaways from the retreat over and over again was, how do we get subject matter experts at the table? How do we get subject matter experts at the table, as well as people with lived expertise? And so that is a task that seems to be rooted in the work of that work group. And while the technical team is also taking on the conversation of the governance structure. And so those are the 2 pathways we see right now, the work that we have to do in terms of next steps. But please fill in what I have left behind.
I think you covered it very well, Keely. That's also the purpose of our kind of half-day retreat this Friday, is really focus on mapping out those processes and move that forward to start making progress on both the governance model as well as that conversation with HAT on meaningful participation in the RHC priorities.
Danny, it looks like you had a question.
Yeah, I'm just curious to hear from the technical team. Well, first of all, I'm really looking forward into reading this more in depth. I haven't had a lot of time to dig into it, but I am really appreciative to see this work product come out of the retreat. It is really helpful, as Jim was saying. And when I look at these 3 things in front of us, they're all very large bodies of work. And important work, and I'm actually excited to. Those next steps, Keely, make sense to me. But what I'm wondering is, we're also getting a lot of funding coming in, and it's a question of capacity and timing. And so I just kind of want to get a sense of that from the folks who are going to be doing that work. How this all pieces together in ways that you don't go insane.
Tom, you want to take a swing at that?
Yeah, I think, so I appreciate that question. I think one of the things we are going to be looking at kind of this retreat, and, I know had conversations with the county manager as we think about that governance structure, is what is the support system that is needed for the RHC. And that, we've talked about the need for whether it's the county or kind of for increased capacity to take on this increased workload. So I think part of that discussion at the retreat is how to move that conversation, and then perhaps, having then I'll be kind of talking to the county manager and kind of maybe whether that's coming back to the RHC about kind of what that structure looks like and how we build that capacity. So I think in the short term, we're having this retreat, there's some discussions, but in the long term, there is need for additional capacity to kind of fully and sufficiently and effectively support the RHC.
Well, and I'll just follow up, and like, even in the short term, like, how's it feeling to you? Because there's a lot coming down right now. And this is a lot of work. So I'm not asking to like try to like squash anything. I'm just genuinely concerned about being able to do everything that needs to be done.
Keely, do you want to?
Yeah, it's a lot. And, we've got the Anchor Community Initiative, the Built for Zero Initiative, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative happening at the same time, where we're trying to build thoughtful processes for our system, and Commerce and the governor having lots of other ideas that are disrupting that they're occupying most of our time. I would say that we're pretty occupied by that. So it is very overwhelming. The capacity is, I think we're at capacity at this point. But we make do with what we can. Rick, Brad.
No, I think Keely's hit on the point. I think there's the three things that we're working on. We've got the WSDOT issue, which is also driving a lot of the funding discussions that we need to be having. The governance issue and also the how do we relationship issue with HAT, as Rick and Keely mentioned, are also something we don't want to lose. But we're also trying to deal with this WSDOT issue that's sort of flooding us. So yeah, we're at capacity, but I do think we can't necessarily set some of this stuff down and then come back to it as easily as we might like to.
I mean, it sounds like to me the consensus is we need more staff, right? I mean, and we've known that from the get-go. Is there any hesitation for us just to go down the road of this, starting to look at staff and doing some hiring as soon as possible to help us with RHC? I mean, is there what's holding us back from taking the next step? So obviously governance is going to be a big part of this, but is there any pushback on the governor's part as well, where there isn't some sort of a independent RHC that has its own staff? Is that still just being discussed, or
that's part of the work on the governance model, is how you expand staff capacity and create that model with a quasi or wherever that RHC is ultimately going to be. Currently staff capacity is based off of each jurisdictional partner's capacity to provide staff and staff resources.
Mm-hmm.
And the collections on the home fund don't start until July 1st. So we have to have some revenue in the house to pay a staff too.
Well, I was just wondering, like, with the way that, with the time it takes to hire someone, does it make sense to go ahead and, just looking at the four kind of next steps in item 3 in that letter, the fourth one is the staffing consideration. And, what if we went ahead and, got moving on hiring a transformational leader whose full-time job it is to organize us and all of this structure and staffing and funding. And then from there, we can build into the next FTEs as the funding becomes more available. I mean, I was going to ask if we were freeing up enough other money from the WSDOT conversation to do that, but if we're starting collections in July, it'll be, 2 to 4 months before we have a person. If we start today, maybe 6, depending on what we get in the pool. And so it might make sense to do that first and then work through the rest of the work plan, to Andy and I think Danny's point.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, Jim. We're on the same page.
And we won't be seeing those, the collection starts in July, but we won't be seeing any of that revenue until September, just a
Okay.
FYI, yeah.
So we just have to float it from a cash flow standpoint for a quarter.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, Ramiro has had his hand up.
Let me see if I can answer some of the questions that were raised. I don't think there is any pushback in terms of looking as to how we can build capacity to support the Regional Housing Council. But I still have to argue the point that we need to open the interlocal agreement.
It's part of it.
And if we don't have that instrument in place to determine the number of staff, how much money, where the money is going to come from to support the additional staff, I think we're getting into this conversation, getting into the solution without having that instrument in place. And I believe the interlocal agreement also open up the governance structure as to how the Housing Action Team can be part of that. With all the respect, absent that instrument being open and agreed upon, we're going to continue to have these conversations. And I don't think I can bring a position in front of the county commissioners without having an agreement where the money is going to come from.
What's the timeline for the city-county agreement?
We just received the draft agreement. We're currently in the internal review, and I'm having a deadline of the end of next week to have a final review from the county. I think we're probably 90% there, and then we'll just go through the individual legislative bodies.
Is that the agreement for the Olympia's incorporation of the home fund into the county home fund?
Yeah, that's the agreement between the county and Olympia to bring that together. Now,
okay,
after we have that together, the interlocal agreement, the Regional Housing Council needs to be open as to how we're going to be developing the decision-making process of the home dollars. The current local agreement is absent on that, is silent. How are we going to develop the organizational structure that includes the administrative arm of the RHC and bringing the Housing Action Team members as part of the governance structure? So there's a lot of work, honestly, on the interlocal agreement that needs to happen. And that's what I believe, if I may, this is the first thing this group needs to concentrate on. In the long-term objective, whether it becomes an independent organization, that's a long-term objective. But that cannot be part of at this point, be part of becoming the short-term and first priority. Just saying.
Is that what Friday's agenda is focused on? I wasn't here at the last meeting. So Friday's agenda is focused on ILA stuff. And is that just technical team? Who's all attending that? Am I supposed to be there? These are questions to which I should clearly already know the answers.
You know, Brad and Tom and Keith can help me out. Friday afternoon is intended for the technical team to get together and map out the processes and steps to develop, the governance model and this process with HAT and that meaningful input. But that ultimately will inform the ILA discussion. Exactly. And that's the pieces that come together. But we got to sit down and look at, okay, how do we map this out? What are some good examples out there? What can we borrow from them, or what's unique to our own self? And then prepare a couple of scenarios for the Regional Housing Council to look at, as well as all the partner jurisdictions too. Because ultimately it's going to have to be formalized into an ILA, as Ramiro has said. But we got to start mapping it out first and providing some proposals for you guys to look at, beat up, massage, all that type of steps and processes going forward.
Jim?
Yeah, I would just say, I think there's no question that we're going to have an interlocal agreement between the city and the county that directs the RHC to, figure it out and do the, administrative staffing. So we're going to at least hire one leader. I don't think there's any question in that. And I think the administrative funding would probably allow for more than that once we get further down our planning process. And then I think we should go ahead with looking towards a hire. But additionally, I think there's nothing in the current RHC interlocal agreement that prohibits us from making a recommendation to the commissioners to, or another partner bringing a cash flow, help to the table to get us going on hiring sooner than later while so we have someone to lead us through the work Romero's talking about. Because I think to me that continues to be an obstacle, and all of this, particularly new state conversation, is really kind of sidetracking, the path everyone was on in hopefully a good way. But the RHC interlocal agreement says and other funding sources, and it allows us to make recommendations around the funding sources that are available in the county, I think, as well as needing to update it.
Okay. Brian and then Danny.
Danny had her hand up.
All right, Danny, then Brian.
Oh, I just wanted to ask since this meeting is happening on Friday with the technical team, what is it that you need from us like right now to be able to get through this as best you can on Friday? Is there something specific that you're needing from this group right now to help provide clarity for your next step on Friday?
I'll just jump in. I don't think so. I think what we really need to do, and kind of why we try to set aside 3 hours, is because there are a lot of pieces. And so there are a lot of buckets, and within that governance structure, there is, there's supposed to be an RHC executive arm. There's supposed to be funding advisory, home fund advisory board. There's kind of the hat. There's kind of staffing. There's 10 different issues that are all intersected to this. And one of the things we need to do is just sit down and kind of whiteboard and figure out processes of what things can we group together that move forward, who are the people that need to be involved in what parts of which conversations, and really kind of think through how all these pieces move forward together in a coherent, organized fashion. So I think we know what the elements are. It's just we need to kind of get together and spend some focused brain power, at least in my mind, of kind of coming up with a process, because there are 10 Venn diagram circles kind of all connected and overlapping that lots of different people have pieces on to move forward and kind of trying to figure that out. So I think right now we have the guidance we need, or we have a sense of where we need to go. It's just some dedicated brain power to kind of think through how we move forward in a coherent, efficient, effective manner. Yeah. And kind of then present you with a proposed process for doing that.
It's essentially the retreat gave us a whole bunch of vacation photos that we need to put into order, is what it really comes down to. We have more than enough information, more than enough things to provide direction. We just need to provide an order for them.
I'll get my slide projector out.
We'll get the family photo album together.
I trust that.
Okay, Brian and then Michael.
Question reference to the IOA. Are you thinking of just having it where it's between the county, Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, and Yelm? Or are we going to include the other communities of Thurston County? And the reason why I'm asking is that if this is going to become a county, the regional issue, we've got other communities that we need to try to include and see if they will become involved or not. And then what are the consequences if they choose not to get involved? Example is, let's say Yelm was not part of the agreement, and all of a sudden the agreement has where certain things are being done, but now Yelm needs help. What's the consequences of Yelm 2 years from now all of a sudden going, we need assistance, but we were never part of the original IOA, never invited, never paid into, or even any of the other things that are involved. That's something I'm just curious about, is are we only keeping with the current configuration? Or are we going to open up to everybody?
Well, briefly, Brian, it was open to everybody. Tenino decided to go its own way for the home fund. Rainier and Dakota turned us down. And so, I think if any of them wanted to approach us and become part of this, we'd welcome the conversation. I don't think there's anything in our governing documents that would prevent this council from pursuing a project in a community that was not a member. I think we go to where the need is. And people can feel free to disagree with me, but I see this as more people than jurisdiction oriented.
Well, and I understand that it's for people, not just jurisdictions, but when it comes down to the funding and comes down to, what happens if, let's say again, using Yelm, if Yelm wasn't part of it, all of a sudden all the homeless, because they aren't wanting to see, Olympia and Lacey are starting to clean up and starting to move people around and say, hey, here are the new rules and things like that. And they all get on the bus and come to Yelm, and now all of a sudden Yelm's overwhelmed. Yes, I understand that, but at the same time, you're giving to a jurisdiction a thing of, reaching out, but now you're taking resources away from somewhere else. I just think we should be including everybody in doing the thing now. And if they choose to turn us down, we need to, I don't want to say we punish them, but we need to recognize that priority goes to those who are part of it, who put resources, whatever they may be, into it before we start helping everybody else out. Maybe I'm wrong on this.
Point taken. We only have a couple of minutes left for this discussion. So Michael, you had a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge that Jim's point, that I agree with Jim and I agree with Ramiro. Like it in terms of being able to shepherd us through this work, I think we need help with that, or it's going to take a lot longer. That seems pretty clear. But in terms of like hiring a full-time person who's going to remain on at the organization in perpetuity in the future, it seems like it would be really difficult to write that job description in a way where you get an applicant for the long term that would fit all of the future needs when we haven't defined what they are in the ILA. So it sort of seems like maybe what we would need is a consultant to help with things as opposed to like a permanent FTE. Because that sort of seems like we might be, like, I agree with you, Ramiro, that, we kind of have to define the scope of the object before we can really write a job description about what the job actually is and what it looks like. Because otherwise we won't get the applicant pool who has the exact sort of talents that we need. So it sort of seems like maybe a consultant could actually be of assistance, though. Not sure if we could talk to King County or Pierce County for who they used for maybe some consultant work and putting their thing together, but just a thought.
That makes sense. Keely.
Just one final thought I wanted to make sure to state is that in our related, not related, but just want to make sure that I put a plug in that in our homeless crisis response plan work group meeting, there was a conversation, I think a comment that maybe came from you, Rick, that said, I think that, like the Regional Housing Council needs to hear these kinds of conversations. And that was also a finding that not a finding, but an observation that the Athena Group consultants had from the retreat, is that for the Regional Housing Council to come to the Greater Regional Outreach Workers League sometime, or the work group for the homeless crisis response plan, et cetera, to just hear the conversations that the providers are having would be helpful, I think, in terms of perspective. So just want to make sure that I brought that up.
Thank you, Keely. Okay.
Sorry, if we wanted to do that, should we reach out to you, Keely, to sort of help with scheduling and organizing that?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, thanks.
Good. Okay. Does anybody have anything else they want to say about the retreat? Carolina?
Yeah, sorry, I've been quiet and I've been listening to everyone's comments, and I kind of feel like the same way that Michael does in terms of, I agree with Ramiro definitely, and opening up the ILA. And I think that would hopefully ease some of Brian's concerns about including other South County cities. If they wanted to join, I mean, we've offered in the past and they didn't want to twice. And so, but if this would give them an opportunity, if maybe they wanted to be a part of it, that would be the chance. But, you know, I also agree with Jim. So I think a consultant sounds like a good idea, but, you know, for me, I think we have such a great team in Keely, Jacinda, and Darian, and, you know, their work that they've been doing. But I think everyone agrees with that.
Okay, thank you. Anything else before we move on?
Well, and I just took one last comment on that is I think we have some amazing talent, and putting, moving somebody into a leadership role like this and backfilling their position, even if it's a little bit nebulous, I don't think there's any question that we have the right people around the table to do that, to do this work. We just need to figure out how to free up some time. And so I'd love it if you all were really creative about that.
Sounds like Friday's going to be an interesting meeting. Okay. Well, let's move on then. If there's nothing else, to the update on the right-of-way. And let's see, Keely, you were going to take that one too? It's your lucky day.
Hey, it's my day, but I'm going to look to my partners who've been involved. We just came from a meeting actually with Commerce that I missed part of. So I may not have everything, but I can give you what I know. The conversations continue, and the pressure continues to build to clear the right-of-ways, the Department of Transportation right-of-ways. The things that we know that are concrete is that there's been some interagency agreements that have gone out from the Department of Commerce, one to the county around getting pass-through funds for Interfaith Works to expand or set aside some of their beds for the next 3 years. And then we will be hopefully issuing a request for proposals for outreach for the next 3 years to right-of-ways, as well as hotels for those actively fleeing domestic violence or interpersonal violence that are living in the right-of-ways currently. So those are some of the concrete immediate steps. What I do know is that the 24 beds are not enough, and that the availability, those beds becoming available without displacing anyone, will take longer than the governor is really hoping for. There is a draft going around of a funding process from the Department of Commerce, which they are redrafting currently, which highlights how many beds need to be available by a certain date. Again, that's being redrafted, so I don't know exactly what it is. I know that the original draft was a really unreasonably high number of beds to have by July, and that is being reconsidered after some feedback. But there is a phased approach to getting folks off of those right-of-ways, all culminating before early fall is the intent. In the language of the draft, there is mention of there's a funding allocation that is mentioned for 5 counties in Washington State, Thurston being one of them, and that there will be an announcement of fund availability, and then we as a region have 10 days to reply with a plan that is in alignment with this funding process. If we do not have a plan that at the minimum accounts for the beds that would be available by a certain date, then the Commerce states that it would directly contract with a nonprofit provider or another local jurisdiction if they feel like they can respond more quickly. So there's a lot happening all at once, many conversations happening at the provider level, at the technical team level, trying to get a sense of what is actually being asked of us and what is possible. We will be meeting on a daily basis with members from staff members from Commerce, Department of Transportation, hopefully the Washington State Patrol, and then members from our technical team, essentially, to make sure that we're as coordinated as possible, and trying to do this in a way that doesn't circumvent the coordinated entry system, and is trauma informed et cetera, and stays within the guidelines that we have from Commerce about how best to do these kinds of actions. So I'm going to turn it over to Rick and Tom and Brad and Jacinda about any other things you'd like to add about this DOT situation.
No, I'll just add that was a really good summary, Keely. You did that very well. I would say, and my understanding is there's also an agreement with the city of Olympia. So there's one with the Thurston County. So I don't want to speak. I have not seen the one that's with the city of Olympia, but I know there's also one between Commerce and the city of Olympia specific to the Franz Anderson property. So I don't know if there's anyone here who can speak to that, but I know that's also in the works.
I can just give you the super basic update. Keith told me that we would have likely a contract in place by, like, we're hoping by like July, end of July at the latest. And so, and that would be largely to build a tiny house village on the Franz Anderson property. There's a couple of other smaller components to that, but that's the main component to build and operate. So hopefully everything keeps moving, and I know it's a lot of extra work, but it's certainly it's helping the total picture quite a bit, I hope. So, but I have that, the same concern as Keely, because we can't find providers to do what we want to do. So I don't know where Commerce is going to find them. So I keep looking at this really nice little hotel by I-5 just south of Chehalis that would be great for us to purchase. I'm just kidding.
The other thing I'll say on that funding, and so if that gets circulated from Commerce, there was 3 buckets of money. 2 of those were kind of renewed annually. So over the next 3 years, the capital funding that the state has available is one-time funding for capital. So there's some ongoing operating funds over the next 3 years, and then a one-time infusion of capital funds. So those are still being kind of finalized, as Keely indicated. But that's the current draft is one time of capital and then ongoing operating over the next 3 years.
Okay. Do any of the other tech team members have anything they want to add to that?
No, I was not able to attend today's meeting because we had a general government committee meeting at the same time. I just, from my perspective, this is the Commerce issues and how all the coordination is occurring is a confusing mess at times, given that there's so many different things trying to be accomplished at the same time with too many jurisdictions all having to take some look at the materials. So we've been trying to respond as fast as we can with what we can with what we're seeing. But I don't always feel that I know what's going on 100% of the time with this. But we'll just try to do the best we can to try to make sure this works. I think our biggest concern on the Tumwater side is just the unintended consequences of dealing with particular sites, and then what happens if the problems go somewhere else, and what do we do now? So we're working on it.
Okay. Jim, with the talking about doing a tiny house village on the Franz Anderson Road site, does that mean that property use is being diverted to that, or will this also eventually include RVs as well?
Right now, the conversation is that there might be some ability to have RVs at, I lost the name of the property. Danny, help me out. What's the other property we bought by where the hotel burned? Is it Quinn Street? Yeah, Quinn Street. When we move the mitigation site, but right now we feel like we're going to have mitigation site opportunities for the folks that are on Ensign Road as their alternative. I think that's the working idea. Our permit process on Ensign Road is not meant to expand that population, and when people move on, it will not be allowed to get bigger. So.
Okay.
Right now, I don't think that we are planning a full-scale RV parking facility anymore.
Okay. Just been out of the loop a bit, and like that picture had changed just a little bit.
Yeah, it's for a decade.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, there's nothing else on the right of way. Let's move on to good of the order. This is anything anybody wants to announce or bring up?
Carolyn, I just want to take a minute and thank all of our technical team staff members because they're putting a lot of extra time in and still responding to all of these different things from every direction all the time. And another example is this time on Friday. And like we would not be here without this team of people that we have. And it's really easy to claim founding an organization as an elected official, but our job, while we're the signer sometimes, it doesn't happen, and it's really significant. So I think it's just a moment that we can take to celebrate them. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I do too. Seems like we ought to be having a pizza party or something here.
But we should definitely get together this summer sometime.
Yeah. Okay.
Romero's buying. He just said it behind his mute.
Woohoo. There we go. Well, this is a way to end on a fun note. Does anybody have anything else for good of the order? All right. Well, hearing none, I guess the next meeting is coming up on June 22nd. Your chair and vice chair are, oh, Tom, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I had one thing I thought of at the last minute that I just want to make sure everyone is aware of around rent assistance. And so we announced this to the Board of County Commissioners, but we are we have enough applications in that we think are going to expend our available rent assistance dollars. We are going to be closing our portal for new rent assistance applications on June 15th. We've let folks know that we will process applications received between June 1st and June 15th based on funding available. We will provide funding. Everyone who had a CAC application remains in process. We're working through those applications. Those will be funded. I'm specifically referring to new applications for new requests for funding for rental assistance that will be closing on June 15th. We are expecting to get an ongoing permanent source of rental assistance funding under the 1277 funds. That will be ongoing. That will be much smaller and a much targeted population. But I wanted to let this group know that we think kind of by June 15th, we'll have all the applications in-house. We'll expend the amount of rent assistance funding we have available from the federal government in the state.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. Okay, and I hope this won't cause a wrinkle, but your chair and vice chair are both have an event on the 22nd, immediately after our meeting. And so we're going to be attempting to to set up remotely so we can attend from the event. But I'll let you know if there's any problems with that. Just not quite sure of the Wi-Fi signal. And
Well, I just said it's the last day of school for the parents, and if there's any, if there's a light agenda, maybe some people would appreciate a break too.
Well, I guess let's let the executive team kick it around, and I if there's nothing pressing, then we could consider doing that. So, okay. And anybody else have anything? Well, who wants to make the motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Keely has her hand.
Oh,
Sorry.
Keely, sorry.
Sorry, I just noticed that Andy Ryder had been unmuted a couple times, so I just didn't know if you wanted to say anything, but it sounds like you just wanted to close the meeting.
No, we're good. Thank you. It's great seeing everyone. I just want to echo what Jim said and thank all the staff. You guys are awesome, and we couldn't do it without you.
All righty. Last call. We have a motion to adjourn. Unless I hear any opposition, let's call ourselves finished with 4 minutes to spare.
Good seeing everyone.
Bye.